Professor Drake stood at his classroom window in the Galactic Academy of Xenobiology, his 4 eyes widening as he watched the human student walk across the campus courtyard. The temperature outside was dropping rapidly, too rapidly for any known species to survive without protective gear. Yet there was Jack Thompson, the only human exchange student at the academy, moving purposefully through the growing storm as if it were merely an inconvenience. "Student Thompson." Drake called through the emergency communication system. "Return to the building immediately. The atmospheric controls are malfunctioning. We're experiencing a Class 5 freeze event." But the human either couldn't hear him or chose to ignore the warning. Drake watched in horror as the temperature readout on his desk continued to plummet. -70°C, -85°C, -100°C. The professor's scaled skin rippled with distress. No organic being should be able to survive such temperatures, especially not for the projected 12 hours it would take for the engineering team to restore the atmospheric controls. He had already ushered all other students into the emergency shelter deep beneath the academy. Through the thickening ice crystals forming on the window, Drake observed Jack's figure growing smaller in the distance. The human was heading toward the agricultural pods, sealed greenhouses where students conducted their botanical experiments. Those pods would offer little protection against these temperatures. "Computer, track vital signs of student Jack Thompson," Drake commanded. "Vital signs stable," the computer responded. "Body temperature maintaining at 37°C. No signs of hypothermia or tissue damage detected." Drake's secondary heart nearly stopped. How was this possible? Even the hardy ice dwellers of Proxima B required specialized suits to survive anything below -60°C. As the blizzard intensified, Drake's view became increasingly obscured. The last thing he saw before the whiteout conditions took over was Jack gathering what appeared to be loose snow into piles. "Computer, maintain vital sign monitoring and alert me to any changes," Drake ordered, his professional curiosity now fully engaged. He pulled up Jack's species file, scanning through the basic information about humans. While they were classified as adaptable, nothing in their biological profile suggested they could survive such extreme conditions. Hours passed, and Drake alternated between pacing and checking the monitoring systems. The temperature outside had stabilized at -120°C, far beyond the survival range of any known sentient species. Yet Jack's vital signs remained steady. "Professor," the computer chimed, "would you like to view the thermal imaging feed from Agricultural Pod Section 7? "Yes, display immediately," Drake responded, his front hands clasping together in anticipation. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a heat signature that made the professor question his sanity. There, in the middle of the frozen wasteland, was a dome-shaped structure. Inside, a human-sized heat signature moved about in what appeared to be a relatively stable microclimate. Drake's scientific mind raced. The human had somehow created a shelter using nothing but frozen water crystals, engineering it in a way that trapped heat while providing protection from the deadly wind and cold. It was primitive technology, yet brilliant in its simplicity. "Computer, record all data for my xenobiology research paper. This may revolutionize our understanding of human survival capabilities," Drake muttered, already composing the introduction in his mind. "And prepare my environmental suit. Once the engineering team restores atmospheric control, I want to examine this structure personally." As Drake watched the thermal imaging, he noticed something else remarkable. The temperature inside Jack's snow structure was maintaining at approximately -5°C, cold by human standards, but well within their survival range. The professor's respect for human ingenuity grew with each passing minute. The storm showed no signs of letting up, but Drake no longer feared for his human student's safety. Instead, he found himself eager to learn how this supposedly primitive species had developed such an elegant solution to extreme cold survival. Perhaps, he mused, it was time to revise the Galactic Academy's classification of human technological advancement. In his personal log, Drake made a note: humans continue to defy our expectations. Their ability to adapt using simple yet effective solutions suggests we may have significantly underestimated their potential for survival in extreme conditions. Further study is warranted. As the first hour of the storm passed, Professor Drake's curiosity got the better of him. He activated the emergency communication channel once again, this time targeting the specific frequency of Jack's student communicator. "Student Thompson, this is Professor Drake. Are you comfortable?" The question felt absurd given the circumstances, but he had to know. To his surprise, Jack's voice came through clearly, accompanied by what sounded like careful scraping noises. "Oh, hey Professor. I'm doing fine. Just finishing up the interior walls of my igloo. Did you know that properly packed snow is an excellent insulator?" Drake quickly activated his recording device. This was unprecedented, a casual conversation with someone surviving in minus 120 degrees Celsius weather. "An igloo, you called it? This is a traditional human survival structure?" "Yes, sir," Jack replied, his voice carrying a hint of pride. "My grandfather taught me how to build them. He was a survival instructor in Alaska, that's a cold region on Earth. The key is to make the blocks in a spiral pattern and angle them slightly inward. Creates a perfect dome." The professor watched through the thermal imaging as Jack continued to move inside the structure, apparently reinforcing the walls. "Fascinating. And you learned this skill for recreational purposes?" A chuckle came through the communicator. "Well, partly. On Earth, we believe in being prepared. Humans have lived in Arctic conditions for thousands of years. We developed these techniques long before we had modern technology. Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Drake noticed something peculiar on his monitors. "Student Thompson, I'm detecting heat signatures from multiple small objects near you. Are you aware of this?" "Those would be my candles, Professor. I always keep a survival kit in my bag: matches, candles, basic tools. The candles help with both light and heat. Also melting snow for water. Even a small flame can make a big difference in a survival situation." The professor's recording tentacles whirred with excitement. This was far more than just surviving. The human was maintaining a sustainable living environment using nothing but frozen water and fire. "Remarkable. And these techniques are common knowledge among your species?" "Not as common as they used to be," Jack admitted. "But we still teach them, especially in colder regions. Better to have the knowledge and not need it, than need it and not have it, right?" Drake made another note in his log: human survival strategies appear to combine inherited knowledge with practical innovation. Their ability to create stable microclimates using minimal resources suggests a deep understanding of thermal dynamics, even without formal scientific training. As they talked, the storm outside intensified. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees, but Jack's vital signs remained steady. The professor observed as his student periodically adjusted the snow blocks, patched any gaps, and maintained what he called a cold well near the entrance, a dip in the floor that trapped the densest, coldest air. "Professor," Jack said after a while, "I noticed some of the agricultural pods might be at risk. The regular heating systems won't hold up in these temperatures. Would you like me to show you how to build some snow barriers around them? It could help protect the specimens until the atmospheric controls are fixed." Drake's 4 eyes blinked in succession. Even in the middle of ensuring his own survival, the human was thinking about preserving the Academy's research. "You can construct additional structures in these conditions?" "Sure," Jack replied casually. "The storm's actually helping, providing plenty of building material. Better to keep busy anyway. Sitting still is the real enemy in survival situations." The professor felt his understanding of human capabilities shifting dramatically. Here was a species that didn't just endure extreme conditions, they found ways to thrive in them, to build and create and even help others. "Student Thompson," Drake said, his voice carrying a new note of respect, "I believe you are about to revolutionize our emergency response protocols. Please, tell me more about these snow barriers while I prepare my environmental suit. I think it's time for a practical demonstration." Professor Drake stepped out of the Academy's airlock in his environmental suit, the external temperature readout flashing warning signals across his helmet display. Behind him, 3 maintenance workers followed, each carrying equipment to help build the snow barriers around the agricultural pods. "Remember," Jack's voice crackled through their communicators, "pack the snow tight and solid. Think of it like making a brick wall, but with frozen water." The human was already at work, expertly cutting blocks from the accumulated snow using a simple tool he'd fashioned from his student ID card and a broken piece of equipment casing. Drake watched in amazement as Jack demonstrated the technique. The human's movements were precise and efficient, showing years of practice. Despite the brutal cold that could freeze most species solid in minutes, Jack worked steadily, his breath visible in small clouds inside his makeshift snow shelter. "The key," Jack explained as he positioned another block, "is understanding that snow is a lot like any other building material. It has strengths and weaknesses. The trick is working with those properties, not against them." One of the maintenance workers, an engineer named Bolt, spoke up. "But how do you calculate the precise angles without measuring tools?" Jack smiled, continuing his work. "We use our eyes and experience. Humans learned these techniques thousands of years ago, long before we had advanced mathematics. Sometimes the best technology is no technology at all." As they worked together building protective barriers around the agricultural pods, Drake noticed something remarkable. The other workers, initially skeptical of such primitive methods, began to show genuine interest. They asked questions about snow density, block placement, and the principles behind the design. "You see," Jack explained while demonstrating how to properly seal gaps between blocks, "humans have always been good at adapting to extreme environments. We evolved on a planet with wildly varying climates. What looks like primitive survival skills to others is really the result of countless generations of trial and error." Drake recorded everything, his scientific mind racing with the implications. "Student Thompson, would you say this adaptability is your species' greatest strength?" Jack paused his work, considering the question. "Not exactly, Professor. I'd say our greatest strength is our ability to pass knowledge down through generations, then build upon it. This igloo design, for example, it's basically the same one that Arctic peoples on Earth used thousands of years ago. But we've learned why it works so well, studied the physics behind it, and now we can adapt it for use on other planets." The professor watched as the protective barriers took shape. Already, the sensors showed that the agricultural pods were maintaining more stable temperatures behind the snow walls. What had seemed like primitive survival skills were proving to be sophisticated engineering solutions using locally available materials. "Think about it this way," Jack continued, patting another snow block into place, "humans didn't become a spacefaring species by abandoning our old knowledge. We got here by keeping what works and combining it with new ideas. These igloos might look simple, but they're based on the same principles we use in our spacecraft design: efficient use of materials, heat management, structural integrity." As if to emphasize his point, Jack had created a small entrance tunnel for each barrier, angled to deflect the worst of the wind. "See these entrances? Same design my ancestors used to keep polar bears out of their shelters. Now we're using it to protect alien plants from a superstorm. Pretty cool, right?" Drake made another note in his log: "Human advancement appears to be cumulative rather than revolutionary. They retain primitive survival techniques not out of sentiment, but because these methods remain practical and effective." This challenges our previous assumptions about technological progress being purely linear. The storm continued to rage around them, but within their protective bubbles of snow and ice, human ingenuity was proving stronger than the elements. As Drake watched Jack teach alien maintenance workers how to build shelters using nothing but frozen water, he realized he was witnessing something more significant than mere survival. This was adaptation at its finest, the perfect blend of ancient wisdom and modern understanding. As the 6th hour of the storm approached, the Academy's backup power systems began to strain under the continued assault of the extreme cold. Professor Drake had returned to the control room, where emergency meetings were being held with the facility's administrators. The atmospheric controls won't be back online for at least another 6 hours, the head engineer reported, his tentacles twitching nervously. But we have an immediate problem. The agricultural pod's environmental systems are failing faster than expected. Without intervention, we'll lose 5 years of research specimens. Drake's upper eyes focused on the thermal imaging display showing Jack's snow barriers. Perhaps, he said thoughtfully, we already have a solution. Student Thompson's primitive, traditional, engineering methods are actually outperforming our technology in these conditions. The Academy's director, Administrator Pell, leaned forward to study the readings. Explain. The agricultural pods protected by snow barriers are maintaining temperatures 30 degrees higher than the unprotected ones, Drake reported. And Student Thompson believes he can improve those numbers further. Through the communication system, Jack's voice joined the conversation. Professor, I've been monitoring the temperature gradients. If we add a second layer of snow blocks with an air gap between them, we can create an even better insulation barrier. It's a technique Arctic researchers use to protect their equipment during polar winters on Earth. The administrators exchanged glances. The idea of relying on packed snow rather than advanced technology seemed to make them uncomfortable. But the numbers were undeniable. There's something else, Jack added, his voice carrying a note of urgency. I've noticed some unusual stress patterns in the main dome support structures. The metal is contracting more than it should in this cold. We might want to consider building snow reinforcements around the critical points. Administrator Pell's color shifted to a worried purple. How could a human possibly know about structural engineering at this level? Because we've made these mistakes before, Jack explained patiently. On Earth, we learned the hard way that extreme cold can make metals brittle. We lost bridges, buildings, and drilling platforms before we figured out how to account for it. Right now, your support beams are showing the same warning signs I learned about in my engineering classes. Drake watched the thermal imaging as Jack emerged from his igloo and began examining the dome support structures more closely. Despite the continuing storm, the human moved with purpose and confidence. The thing about survival, Jack continued, marking potential reinforcement points in the snow with his makeshift tools, is that it's not just about making it through the current crisis. It's about learning from it, adapting, and being better prepared for the next one. The professor noted how Jack's body temperature remained stable even as he worked in the open. The human's natural adaptations, combined with the practical knowledge of how to work in extreme cold, were proving to be a remarkable combination. Administrator, Drake said, I believe we should give Student Thompson authorization to proceed with his reinforcement plan. My xenobiology research suggests humans have an almost instinctive understanding of structural engineering in survival situations. They can literally feel when something isn't right, even before our instruments detect it. As if to emphasize Drake's point, a stress warning alarm began blinking on one of the support beams Jack had just marked. Administrator Pell's color shifted again, this time to a decisive blue. Authorization granted. And, notify the other emergency shelters. I want every available maintenance worker to learn these snow construction techniques. It seems we've been overlooking some valuable primitive, traditional, engineering methods. Drake watched as Jack began teaching more alien workers how to build proper reinforcements. The human simple techniques, passed down through generations and refined by science, were proving more reliable than the Academy's most advanced technology. In his personal log, Drake added, "Perhaps we need to reconsider what we mean by advanced technology. The most sophisticated solution isn't always the most effective one. Humans seem to understand this instinctively, maintaining a toolkit that spans from the primitive to the cutting edge, ready to use whatever works best in each situation." The ninth hour of the storm brought a new challenge. The Academy's main power core began showing signs of critical failure, its cooling systems unable to cope with the extreme external temperatures. "It doesn't make sense," the head engineer muttered, his appendages flicking through diagnostic screens. "The core should be able to handle temperatures far lower than this." Jack, who had been monitoring the situation through his communicator while continuing to reinforce the dome's supports, spoke up. "It's not just about the temperature. The rapid change is causing condensation inside your systems. On Earth, we call this flash freezing. It can shut down even the most advanced equipment." Professor Drake watched as the human's vital signs remained steady despite hours of physical labor in the lethal cold. "Student Thompson, do you have a solution?" "Actually, I do," Jack replied, his voice carrying that now familiar tone of practical confidence. "We can use the same principle that makes igloos work, but in reverse. Your power core isn't just too cold, it's experiencing temperature fluctuations. We need to stabilize it." The human quickly sketched out a plan that seemed both brilliantly simple and wildly unorthodox. Using snow blocks and carefully controlled heat vents, they could create a natural convection system that would maintain a constant temperature around the power core. "It's like building a reversed igloo," Jack explained as he directed the maintenance team. "Instead of keeping cold out, we're using the snow's insulating properties to manage heat distribution." The Inuit people on Earth used similar principles to regulate temperature in their winter shelters. Administrator Pell, who had been skeptical of these primitive solutions at first, now watched with growing interest as the human's plan took shape. "How did your species develop such precise understanding of thermal dynamics without advanced technology?" Jack smiled as he carefully positioned another snow block. "Trial and error, mostly. When your survival depends on something, you learn its rules pretty quickly. Every winter storm, every failed shelter, every frozen village taught us something new. We passed that knowledge down, refined it, and eventually proved it with science." The maintenance team, now well-practiced in snow construction thanks to Jack's earlier lessons, worked efficiently to build the thermal management system. They had learned to trust the human's seemingly simple but effective solutions. "The clever part about snow," Jack continued while checking the power core's readings, "is that it's not just about insulation. It's about heat exchange. A well-built snow structure can help regulate temperature in both directions. That's why igloos can keep you warm in winter but also cool in strong sunlight." Professor Drake's recording tentacles whirred constantly, documenting everything. "Student Thompson, you're suggesting that your species developed advanced thermodynamic engineering through practical experience, before you had the mathematical models to explain it?" "Exactly, Professor. Sometimes you don't need to understand why something works to know that it does work. Though obviously, the science helps us apply these principles in new ways, like saving an alien power core." As if on cue, the power core's temperature began to stabilize. The emergency warnings faded, replaced by steady green indicators. Jack's improvised thermal management system was actually performing better than the Academy's standard cooling protocols. "Remarkable," Administrator Pell observed, their color shifting to an impressed gold. "We've been approaching environmental challenges from the wrong direction. Our focus on technological solutions made us overlook simpler, more reliable methods." Drake added another note to his ever-growing research log: "Human innovation appears to follow a unique pattern. Rather than abandoning traditional methods in favor of advanced technology, they maintain a continuous spectrum of solutions, from simple to complex. This adaptability allows them to select the most appropriate approach for each situation, regardless of its technological sophistication. The storm continued to rage outside, but within the academy, a new appreciation for human ingenuity was taking root. What had started as a simple survival situation had evolved into a master class in practical engineering, proving that sometimes the most advanced solution was also the most ancient. The 11th hour of the storm brought a development that no one had anticipated. The Academy's structural integrity sensors began blaring with urgent warnings. The extreme cold had affected the building's foundation more severely than predicted. "The ground is shifting," Jack announced through the communication system, his voice tense but controlled. "The permafrost effect is happening faster than it should. We've got maybe 30 minutes before the main support columns start failing." Professor Drake's four eyes widened as he studied the readouts. Permafrost effect? How could you possibly know about geological changes on an alien planet? "Because we've seen this before," Jack explained while quickly gathering the maintenance team. "On Earth, when ground freezes and thaws, it can break apart buildings, roads, even entire foundations. The physics doesn't change just because we're on another planet." Administrator Pell's color shifted to emergency red. "The evacuation shelters won't protect us if the main structure fails. We need to move everyone to the orbital station, but the shuttle bays are already frozen shut." "We don't need to evacuate," Jack said firmly. "We can stabilize the foundation, but we'll need every available hand. And we'll need to work fast." The human quickly outlined his plan. It was audacious, seemingly impossible, yet grounded in centuries of Arctic engineering experience. They would build a series of snow trenches and barriers that would redirect the pressure from the freezing ground and protect the Academy's critical support points. On Earth, native peoples in cold regions learned to work with the freezing ground, not against it, Jack explained as he led teams to critical positions around the foundation. They built structures that could flex and move with the Earth's changes. "We're going to apply the same principle here, just on a bigger scale." Professor Drake, now in his environmental suit again, watched in amazement as Jack coordinated the effort. The human had been working non-stop in lethal cold for nearly 11 hours, yet showed no signs of fatigue. His movements remained precise, his instructions clear and confident. "The key," Jack continued, demonstrating the correct technique for the snow reinforcements, "is to create flexibility in the right places while maintaining rigidity where we need it. The snow structures we're building will act as shock absorbers, taking the pressure off the main foundation." The maintenance teams, now experts in snow construction thanks to Jack's earlier lessons, worked with impressive efficiency. What had seemed like primitive survival skills hours ago were proving to be sophisticated engineering techniques perfectly suited to their crisis. "Student Thompson," Drake asked while helping to position a snow block, "how did humans develop such advanced architectural knowledge without modern technology?" Jack smiled as he checked the alignment of a support trench. "Professor, humans learned these techniques because we had to. When your survival depends on understanding how cold affects different materials, you pay very close attention. Every failure taught us something new. Every success was passed down to the next generation." The Academy's sensors continued to show increasing pressure from the freezing ground, but now they could see Jack's defensive structures beginning to take the strain. The snow barriers flexed and compressed exactly as designed, protecting the rigid foundation beneath. Administrator Pell watched the readings with growing amazement. "The pressure is redistributing itself, just as Student Thompson predicted. These primitive techniques are actually saving our advanced structure." Drake added another observation to his research log: "Human engineering appears to be based on a deep understanding of natural forces. Rather than trying to overpower nature with technology, they have learned to work within its constraints, using simple materials in surprisingly sophisticated ways." As the storm entered its final hour, the Academy's foundation stabilized. Jack's snow. Engineering had not only prevented a catastrophic collapse but had also created a protective system that would help the structure withstand future temperature extremes. You know what's really interesting about all this? Jack said, finally allowing himself a moment's rest in his igloo. Everything we've done today, the igloos, the barriers, the foundation reinforcement, it's all based on the same simple principle, understanding and working with nature instead of fighting against it. As the atmospheric controls finally came back online and the temperature began to normalize, Professor Drake stood in the Academy's main hall, addressing an emergency session of the Galactic Education Board. The events of the past 12 hours had attracted significant attention throughout the scientific community. Distinguished colleagues, Drake began, his recording tentacles displaying holographic images of Jack's various snow structures. What we witnessed today wasn't just survival. It was a masterclass in practical engineering that challenges our fundamental assumptions about technological advancement. The human student stood quietly to one side, looking somewhat embarrassed by all the attention. Despite having worked for 12 straight hours in lethal cold, he appeared remarkably fresh and alert. The only sign of his ordeal was a slight redness in his cheeks. Student Thompson did more than simply survive a crisis, Drake continued. He demonstrated that what we previously dismissed as primitive survival techniques are, in fact, sophisticated engineering solutions that can outperform our most advanced technology under certain conditions. Administrator Pell stepped forward, their color now a respectful deep blue. The snow barriers and reinforcements remain in place as a precautionary measure. Our engineers have confirmed that these structures are actually improving our facility's overall stability. We're implementing them as permanent features of our cold weather protocols. One of the board members, a crystalline being from a warm world, raised an appendage. But surely this was just a fortunate coincidence? One human's survival knowledge couldn't possibly. Jack politely interrupted, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone who knows their subject thoroughly. With respect, this wasn't just my knowledge. What I use today represents thousands of years of human experience, passed down and refined through countless generations. Every technique I demonstrated was developed by people who had to understand their environment to survive. Professor Drake displayed more holographic data. The evidence is conclusive. The Igloo design alone demonstrates an intuitive understanding of structural engineering that we're only beginning to fully appreciate. The snow barriers saved 5 years of irreplaceable research specimens. The thermal management system they created for our power core was more efficient than our standard protocols. But most importantly, Drake emphasized, this experience has taught us something crucial about human advancement. They don't abandon traditional knowledge when they develop new technology. Instead, they maintain a continuous spectrum of solutions, from the seemingly primitive to the highly advanced. The board members murmured among themselves, their various appendages and sensory organs showing signs of deep thought. Jack used this moment to add his own perspective. You know, he said, looking around at the alien faces, on Earth we have a saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same. The basic principles of survival don't change just because we have advanced technology. Understanding how to work with natural forces, using simple materials effectively, knowing how to adapt to extreme conditions, these skills will always be valuable, no matter how advanced we become. Administrator Pell's color shifted to a thoughtful purple. Perhaps we need to revise our entire curriculum. We've been so focused on teaching advanced technology that we've overlooked the importance of fundamental problem-solving skills. I have a suggestion, Jack offered. On Earth, many of our top engineering schools still teach basic survival and practical engineering alongside advanced theory. It helps students understand the principles behind the technology they're developing. Professor Drake's recording tentacles whirred with excitement. Yes. Imagine combining our advanced theoretical knowledge with this practical, hands-on approach to problem solving. The educational possibilities are endless. The board unanimously approved a new addition to the Academy's curriculum, Practical Engineering and Survival Techniques, with Jack Thompson named as a special consultant. What had started as a simple survival situation had evolved into something much more significant, a bridge between traditional wisdom and advanced technology. In his final research note of the day, Professor Drake wrote, "Perhaps the true measure of a civilization's advancement isn't just its technology, but its ability to maintain and apply knowledge from all stages of its development. The humans, in maintaining their ancient survival skills alongside their advanced technology, may be more sophisticated than we ever realized." As the last of the snow barriers were being documented for future reference, Jack stood with Professor Drake, watching alien students eagerly learning how to build their first igloos. "You know, Professor," he said with a smile, "sometimes the best way to move forward is to remember where you came from."